We wish everyone another Shabbat Shalom. We hope that you will take a moment to reach out to one another, wish each other a Shabbat Shalom as well, however that is possible for you this evening. I began this week learning with Dr. Betsy Stone, a retired psychologist who now serves as an adjunct professor at the Hebrew Union College, JIR. During the COVID-19 crisis, Dr. Stone has led many webinars on trauma and resilience and post-traumatic growth for different congregations and groups of rabbis and hillels and many, many more. And so, this Monday, together with Rabbi Spolansky and other members of the Reform rabbis of Greater Toronto Group, we had conversations with Dr. Stone about the physical and mental effects of trauma and holding on to pain for prolonged periods of time. And we asked the question that all Jewish professionals are asking: how can we even begin to think about self-care while we are so overwhelmed? How can we collectively seek healing and holiness? This final section of Leviticus, which we will be concluding tomorrow morning, is referred to as the Holiness Code. And in these passages, our very own Rabbi Gunter Plaut explains holiness is understood not only in terms of ceremonial purity, but especially in terms of personal and social righteousness. And therefore, following the mitzvot is not simply about performing or refraining from certain actions, but also it is about the morality behind those actions. The underlying message that we can uncover from this text is that it is important to follow the commandments and to be moral and an ethical people, because our actions have an impact on the world as a whole. Torah guides us towards holiness, and yet I find that some of the holiest moments of my life are sometimes unrelated to the mitzvot. Seeing my little boy smile when he wakes us up in the morning, taking a midnight stroll with friends in the pitch-black darkness of the Negev desert, or simply singing and playing music together with people that I love. More recently, I have found holiness in the latter, for what we affectionately call in our house family music time. This week, after a particularly long Monday, I came upstairs to play guitar with Katie and Abe just before bath time, and perhaps I was in a little need of healing, but in any case, I felt drawn to sing the prayerful words that we just sang together of Debbie Friedman's Mishaberach, which is not necessarily, I should add, a regular on the family music time set list. And as we sang, I looked up and I saw that Katie was rather emotional. And she said, maybe this is a coincidence or maybe something deeper, but did you know that I have actually spent most of the day researching this very song? Do you know the story behind the Mishaberach? I realized I did not, and so the unofficial archivist in the family went on to tell me the story of how Debbie Friedman and Rabbi Drora Settle were asked to write the melody of this Mishaberach prayer for a friend's 60th birthday celebration. As Rabbi Settle described the experience in a 2011 article published in The Forward, she writes, in working with the words of the Mishaberach prayer, Debbie and I were concerned with several issues. First and foremost at that time was the growing AIDS crisis in the gay community, which affected many who were part of our extended family of friends. How, we wondered, could we ask for refuah shlema, for a complete healing, for people who had what was at the time a terminal illness? It seemed not only cruel but contrary to the Jewish prohibition against knowingly praying for something in vain. She continues, "We thought it would be more appropriate to focus on the possibility of spiritual healing, an experience of wholeness and blessing, even in the face of death. We kept the rabbinic phrase refuah shlema, but redefined it as the renewal rather than the repair of body and spirit." That idea of renewal rather than repair, it seems so simple. Just a turn of phrase, but in so many ways it is what makes this piece of liturgy so powerful. As we struggle with the outcomes of prolonged quarantine, prolonged stress and loneliness, we too are looking to renew our spirit. Our lives will be forever touched by the trauma of this pandemic, but we still look within ourselves for spiritual growth, and we look to each other and to our God to continue seeking holiness. Rabbi Settle says that Debbie knew all too well that every one of us, simply by virtue of being a human being, experiences pain and brokenness, and therefore we all need healing. Yet at the same time, she taught us that all of our lives are a joyful blessing. And certainly her life and her work continue to bless us. As we look back at the Holiness Code, we see that this section of Torah discusses blessings and curses in the context of our conduct. If we adhere only to the very strict and literal reading of this text, the passage equates blessings with by following the commandments and curses when violating them. Or in other words, when good things happen to us, it is because we have been good people, and when bad things happen to us, it is because we are bad people. But I'm going to suggest, and I believe you will agree, that perhaps this is an unhealthy and unhelpful way to read the text, as if a single person's action directly yields reward or punishment for themselves and their world alone. These biblical words are not speaking to individuals, but rather to the entire community. What these passages truly mean is that we collectively, as a Jewish people and as a society at large, are responsible for each other. As Rabbi Plaut observes, the consequences of our conduct can rarely be limited to ourselves. For good or for bad, what we do affects the lives of others in the present and in the future. Rabbi Plaut could have written these words yesterday, and he would have still been speaking to the very moment that we find ourselves in. Holiness and healing. They require of us not only personal intention, but equally as important, a community in which to find comfort and to grow. As each of us continue to cope with the prolonged trauma of living through the COVID-19 pandemic, let us this Shabbat find a quiet moment of reflection and gratitude for our ability to gather as a community, each and every Shabbat, each and every day in prayer. Perhaps not in the way that we would necessarily like, but undoubtedly in a way that is good for our souls. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Let's take a moment of holiness now as we rise together on page 138, I believe, for the counting of the Omer. 138.